Good evening. My name is Richard Safier, Superintendent of Schools, and welcome to Superintendent's Corner. This show is an opportunity to talk about the successes, the challenges, and the issues facing the Gloucester Public School District, and perhaps most importantly, to talk about these issues with those folks most responsible for helping to govern the District of Gloucester. Today we have the pleasure of introducing and speaking with our new principal at the O'Malley Innovation Middle School, Miss Lynne Beattie. Lynne, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you
Nice
for coming
to be here.
on. Terrific. As is usually my custom, I ask a little bit about background. So tell us a little bit about where you came from. And
Sure. So I come from a family of educators, as you know, and for a while I fought it and went into the restaurant business and ran a restaurant and catering business after getting out of college. And quite quickly in my path decided that wasn't enough to feel like I was contributing to the community. So followed the lead and went back to school and got my graduate degree in education. I taught in Natick for a few years until moving to Concord, and I was in Concord for 21 years. So at that time I began in Concord as a 5th grade teacher, quickly moved to middle school, and I would never leave middle school again. I think I taught English and math, and then math for a number of years, and became the assistant principal and then the principal, and stayed there for 7, and then moved for a brief couple of years to a central office position because I am still impassioned with technology.
right, you were the digital and literacy coordinator for
Yes.
Concord Carlisle.
Yes, so coordinating the technology integration over the district was really interesting and exciting, and I had a wonderful team. But almost immediately missed the building and missed the kids and missed the teachers and missed the parents. So it made sense to go back into the fray and look for a principalship, and I'm very happy to have landed at O'Malley.
Great, and it's our good fortune as well. It's funny how our backgrounds, we take sides, and I was a high school person. I can't see myself doing middle or elementary, and I heard you just say the middle school. So what is special about middle schools?
Middle school is it's the middle. It's, as people always talk about, their middle child. Elementary kids are there for usually 6 years or so. They're forming their literacy and their math skills and their social skills, and they're very young and very protected. And then high school is the place that kids exit, not maybe quite into the real world because they go to college, but it is into the world. They're independent, etc.
Yeah.
It also has the pleasure or pressure of being the entrance exam, grades, transcripts kind of place. So middle school is that place where everything meets. The social emotional development comes into play. Work habits and learning habits become really important, and also then kids get to try different things, take risks, and formulate a little more of their direction and where they're headed into high school. They grow at an enormous rate, so it's there's a lot of diversity in terms of where the kids are at developmentally. The hormones kick in, which is pleasant or unpleasant depending on your experience.
Right.
But they're funny kids. They're one day smiling, 5 minutes later not smiling and struggling, and want to be adults but still want the care that they had at elementary school. So it's all those transitions, I think.
Right.
And helping them navigate that water that really is intriguing, and I feel like I just get attached to it.
That's good. When I hear you speak about it, each of the different levels are in a various state of becoming. Maybe it's just a little bit more compressed and a little bit more intense at the middle school level, and maybe that's what attracts you to it.
Could be.
Right.
I know that when a kid walks in 6th grade, day 1, and you see them the last day in 8th grade, it's oftentimes they look like a completely different being, even physically.
Right.
And they go through not just external changes, but internal. So.
Right. So with that very vivid description of middle school life and the middle school child, there must be some core values with respect to education and the middle school. So what sort of core values do you see yourself bringing to O'Malley?
I have 3 that I've thought about and worked through and developed over the years that I live by, and they're pretty simple. It's community, high achievement, and lifelong learning. So we can't do it without being a community, and that includes not only the faculty and staff and students at the school, but also the parent community and the surrounding members of the community. We all need to work together as a village to really support the kids and bring to them what they need. On the other side of that, we want kids to understand what it means to be part of a community, and that's invaluable. So helping them be good citizens and understand how to help out others around them, even if they're not best friends, but to understand that they're community members and they have a connection regardless of whether they have anything in common otherwise. So that's the primary place to start for the foundation. Achievement is, I do truly believe that all kids can learn. So what we want to help them get to the place where they're learning at the highest level to which they're capable. And there are various ways we do that, mostly by getting to know the kids. If we know them well and we understand what they come in with and what they go home to, and what their interests are and what their readiness level is, we can do a better job at meeting them where they need to be met. And the last one, lifelong learning, I think is really about the passion. I've always believed that if we can help students become learners and understand the excitement in learning, then they're prepared for life. So it might not be a specific subject or content or book they've read or something they've studied, but it's about knowing how to learn and knowing how to find information and knowing how to seek success in their own way and develop their own path through life.
And once again, you've given a description to actually what's the mission of the Gloucester Public Schools, which is for our students to become engaged, lifelong learners. And as principal, you sort of live that and embody it, which is...
it's one of the reasons why I felt this was a good fit for me.
Oh, interesting. Good. And the other piece I got from what you were saying earlier on is that when you talk about a sense of community, and I'm thinking, well, these are public schools, the whole word public we take for granted, but public does mean that. It does mean that involvement and direct connection to the community itself. Sometimes we may take that for granted, but it's really something that we should be building on.
Sure.
So coming into a new situation always requires a little bit of investigation and meeting and in educational parlance we refer to as entry and entry plans and all that kind of business. So since coming on board, how have you gone about learning about O'Malley specifically and Gloucester in general, etc.?
Sure. I visited a couple times in the spring to O'Malley and sat in on some data teams and met with staff and got to know, introduced myself around. But most of my time, I think, since committing to coming here to work has been trying to learn about the school and the community. So over the summer, I set up open office hours and people scheduled with me. And I met with over 90 people throughout the summer, mostly staff, but also parents and some students and some community members. So I had 3 questions. One was, what do you value and find that is part of O'Malley that you would want to make sure stays with us? The second was, what do you see as an opportunity for growth and change? And then the third was simply, what else do you want me to know about you? So I had some great conversations with people, and I was able to learn not only about the school, but also about history of Gloucester. We've got a lot of employees who have been in the school for quite some time, but also many people who were born and raised here. Right.
And my next question, of course, is if you can share a couple of the some of the takeaways from the conversations, what you've learned. And
okay. I think the biggest takeaway is how dedicated everyone is to the kids. And that's and eager and willing to be open-minded about changing and growing however we need to do that to make it even better. Most of the teachers talked about the value of working together as a faculty and a team. And I got a real strong sense that people enjoy being together. They enjoy what they do. They enjoy the kids. Not that it's not challenging now and then, but the fact that they really want to do well together and are eager to try different ways to do that. There are, obviously logistical things that came up around how our schedule runs and things like that people would be interested in growing and seeing how else we can run our programs, our sales principles that are, the service, acceptance, integrity, leadership, and success.
Good work. I'm still working on it.
I want to make sure I got that right. That's really the foundation. And people who came to talk to me who weren't at the school Also, that everyone knows about it. They know O'Malley Sales. The kids knew it when I talked to them in the spring.
Right.
The faculty talk about it. So it's a great foundation to start with and say, okay, what does this mean to us, and how can we make it even better, and how can we help the kids really instill solid principles within themselves to be good citizens, to know to do the right thing, to understand expectations, and to be contributors.
When we talk to folks who are familiar with O'Malley going back 10, 20, 25 years and stuff, they do speak of a renaissance in what you just described, that it is built upon principles of character and integrity and dignity and respect and leadership and acceptance and service and all the things that I did not possibly get the acronym correct, but all the other quality traits, they also are relevant as well. Stylistically, and I don't mean that in a negative or pejorative way, but stylistically, I think we've come an exceptionally long way, and it's not a rough and tumble. And it's also true that in many districts, the middle school always gets a bad name as being a bit on the rough and tumble side, so Gloucester's not unique in that. And yet I think that we also have been successful in bringing about some form of a renaissance with respect to attitude and way in which children comport themselves within the building as well. And it's something that your background, your articulation, etc., I think is prepared to continue to extend. With that in mind, we also have a job to do with respect to academic rigor.
Sure.
And speaking for myself, I would very much like to see a terrific school and a great place to be like O'Malley begin to show more of an upward climb in terms of the accountability and scores and assessments and academic rigor. Not looking for a rocket ship kind of progressive movement, but just a slow, gradual move towards ever stronger sense of performance, and thus student learning, student achievement and stuff. In a word, I'm talking about academic rigor. So what you learned, what you heard, and what you bring to the table, can you speak to that concept just a little bit?
Sure. I actually just met with one of the grade levels for math today and had a conversation that revolved around this a little bit. I see looking at a program and understanding how it functions and then trying to determine what is the next step to do it even better for the kids as it's got to be a team effort, a collaborative effort. It has to be focused on really understanding your content and what resources are available and being willing to try new instructional practices. But along the way, that assessment word that you mentioned is key.
The A word.
And not just testing to test, but really testing and then evaluating and understanding the information you got from it. So some of the questions I've gotten are these the right assessments? And my question back is, well, is it giving you the information you need to plan your curriculum, revise your curriculum, and do what you need to do to help the kids do better? I'm not certain that that's necessarily the case right now. I think that people are interested in refining that practice to really being able to do maybe not full-blown assessments, but smaller assessments that gather that information that they can put into practice.
Right.
And there's certainly a willingness to take that and look at different ways they can approach curriculum, whether it's co-teaching or whether it's differentiation. We talked quite a bit about we actually met as a faculty and talked about goal setting yesterday, and one of the things I talked about is that if we can get to a place where we are vertically aligned within the school, and when people are thinking about how their kids are performing and what they're demonstrating for skills, then and deciding together as teams how we could approach that and what would be the steps we would take, what actions in order to try and move to that next step. And then we build that framework together. So the more we can integrate and collaborate together from the individual classroom teacher to the school and or department subject area, for example, as a team, and then build our plan together as a school so our school goals reflect what every individual is contributing from the classroom. So that, I think, really builds a strong, not to use a poor metaphor, but the ship, and I know we're in Gloucester, so I don't want to overplay that, but it really is. We move together as a team, and we go through and we can rely upon each other. So we currently have differentiation in our school goals in various places, being able to talk together as a faculty, not just within a math or English department, but also pulling in practices, different strategies and resources that other subject areas may use, whether it be social studies or art. into a math or English classroom, and thinking about how that differentiation works in one place and how it can be used in another, and having those conversations together can get us to a more solid ground.
I think illustrated that just a little while ago when you mentioned the whole term vertical alignment, which means, I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, correct me, but that the 6th grade has a pretty clear sense of what they need to do to prepare children for the 7th grade, and the 7th grade for the 8th grade, and that vertical alignment is what creates that seamless cohesion as students go up through the grades.
Right.
A second thing that comes out of, for me, what comes out of is what I've sort of been banging around a little bit since the summertime, which is this whole notion of collective efficacy, meaning that if staff, teachers, administrators believe in themselves and believe in what they can do and believe, as you said before, that every child can learn, there's a lot of research out there, particularly by a fellow by the name of John Haiti, that says out of 250 or so different elements that affect student learning, including home, environment, various instructional strategies, the collective belief system of the culture of a school itself by far is one of the strongest means by which schools can improve on student learning and achievement. And a lot of what you're describing falls, in my judgment, falls into that particular bucket. And it's just an idea that I'd like all of us to continue to explore, because I think it's interesting. More importantly than it being interesting is the fact that research showing that it gets results. We like results.
We do. And I think that, I see my role as being the facilitator for the teachers in the classroom, and helping them to self-reflect and evaluate what they're doing so that they can make decisions as the experts with the content about how best to proceed. And then, I'm there to coach them, to provide those resources, the support, the feedback, so that they can grow in their roles.
Right. And you won't have to go it alone, because we're working with consultants, in this case a company by the name of Momenta, which has changed its name after quite a number of years from Bay State Reading Institute. We first brought this literacy consulting firm into the elementary schools well over close to 7 years ago now. We're now making inroads into the middle school. This will be sort of the second year that Momenta / Bay State Reading Institute will be involved in the elementaries. In the middles. Now, I know that you're brand new to this, but can you speak to it, your first impressions as to what this is all about?
Well, I've met with the person who's working with me deliberately as the principal a couple of times, and I think we have a good understanding of how we're going to proceed, and it relates to what I just talked about, where we'll be spending time, and then the coach that works with the literacy coach that works directly with the teachers will coordinate to spend time in classrooms, look at what teachers are doing, what they've already tried, what's worked, what hasn't, and then hopefully give us some suggestions on what our next steps might be, or how we refine our practice, or new research that's out there and instructional practices that perhaps haven't been tried, or that sometimes things are tried in one way and don't work, but if you bring them back and tweak them a little bit, deliberate to the kids that are in front of you, then you end up with a successful result.
Right. They don't necessarily import all these ideas, but they do pinpoint what seems to work so that we can then make that something which is universally applied across various subject areas, particularly literacy at the middle school. Yeah. So it's been a good working relationship, and I'm glad to see that it's at the middle school, and I appreciate and thank you for open-mindedness, and I think that the way has been paved. Teachers, they always are weighing and measuring, is this worth the candle? I mean, I'm a busy person, is it worth the candle? I think the groundwork has been laid for that, where they do appreciate that, and we'll see how it bears fruit going down the road.
I'm never one to turn down resources, so if you offer me resources,
can you spare me a dime?
I will analyze the resource and try to form it and make sure that it's going to work for us, and that's what I've told the teachers, is that we have this. You need to think about how it can help you, and what you're looking for in your classroom for resources, support, information, and that's what we'll try to make happen.
Great, terrific. You have an extensive background in technology. We have the Chromebook one-to-one implementation from grade 8, 9, 10, 11, and now this year 12. As I mentioned before, you were the digital literacy coordinator for your prior district, and you've brought on a digital literacy teacher here for some of our electives at the middle school. So envision's too strong a word, but what would you like to see happen?
my vision for technology is always that it's pervasive, but appropriately pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no longer the addition. I think several years ago it stopped being the addition
Right.
to your learning tools. It's part of your learning toolkit. And for people to function in society today, they have to be computer literate.
Mm-hmm.
And that means not just how to turn it on, turn it off, how to type a document in word processing, but it also means how to understand and navigate the digital world online, and how to use the tools to your advantage. The most important use of tools, I think, beyond the connection and global audience that you can reach out to, is the creation opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the primary purpose of the digital literacy teacher, is not necessarily to teach the kids how to use Google Apps, although there will be some of that happening. It's really about what you can make with technology.
Mm-hmm.
So it's here's how to build a website. It's even iMovie and recording and putting photos up. It can be creating slides. It can be coding to
Mm-hmm.
build your own app and learn at some point how to create an app that will be on that phone that you don't ever take your eyes off of.
Except in class.
Except in class, because they don't bring them.
Right.
Yeah. So, it really is, it's part of who we are these days. It's not part of who I was as a kid.
Right.
Because,
right.
But it
Being
is
39 and all, it's couldn't possibly be part
exactly
of it.
right. That's right. But I've transitioned over. I could almost call myself a digital native, but not technically. But I do find that it is part of what I do every day. Kids that are in middle school now don't know what it's like to be without it. So it is part of the world that they've always seen and always grown up with.
Right.
And that's where you think about a challenge for it. There's a navigation there that kids need to learn. So when we talk about online safety, we also have to talk about balance. We don't want anyone to be on screen all the time.
Right.
Just because I love technology and see its value doesn't mean I want to be looking at my phone all day or my computer screen. It's not healthy. So that's part of the balance when we talk about it is, how do we think in an algorithmic way, so we learn how to understand the procedural work that a computer needs to be programmed or an app needs to be designed, but then we also think about the fact that it's really good to go out and play sometimes.
Right.
At the beach,
Right.
in the woods, on the playground, and that's really essential to do both.
With the advent of technology, there is always this notion about students taking on more of a responsibility for their learning. Is that something you can comment on?
I think it comes along with the making. That one of the things that I've seen, and I saw it early on when we brought a one-to-one program to my former district, is that parents were amazed at what the kids could figure out by themselves. And that's where it goes right back to the lifelong learning value, because what I see in technology and the opportunity for kids is that they don't necessarily need to have somebody else teach them how to do something. If a kid wants to learn how to knit, they can go online and find a YouTube video and follow it and learn how to knit. And that's just one simple example, but kids have already figured that out. If they want to know something, they don't need an adult to tell them how.
Right. When I think about the old days, you'd take out a manual and you'd read this thing and it was, your eyes would bleed. It was just absolutely brutal. Now I know, go in, make your mistakes, whatever happens, and but that's how you learn.
Sure.
Yeah.
It does allow for an
I
opportunity.
when I turn this off. Excuse me.
I think it encourages mistakes, especially when we talk about coding. Kids have to do something and then find out whether it works or not, and then change it to try something else. And that's something I think we lose if the educator is always the one imparting the information, especially from the front of the room. So the more we can give kids open-ended experience or a problem to solve or something to explore where they have to figure out what direction to take and make mistakes and figure out how to change that direction, then that's the valuable learning that they get from it.
That's right. And failure is a good thing in that context.
It is.
And it's also one of the fundamental tenets of what O'Malley as an innovation school is all about. We are supposed to be project-based, which doesn't mean that you're building a model out of plastic. It means that you're going in a particular direction with the expectation that there are going to be side roads and mistakes and so on and so forth. And then the facilitator and the teacher are the ones that help just to shape you back so that you can continue your exploration in the right path and such.
Yeah.
To do that and so many other things, does require a certain amount of professional development. To some degree, professional development perhaps for this year was established prior to your coming on board, but maybe you could speak broadly to the importance of professional development, and I heard you mention a couple of things before about differentiation and co-teaching and all the rest. And maybe, I don't know, has the conversation with you and the assistant superintendent evolved with respect to professional development?
To some extent. I actually asked for, after one event is set up, I asked for nothing else to be booked until the faculty could get involved. One of the things that I think is really beneficial for faculty, especially coming together under new leadership, is to be able to share some of the expertise that they have. So rather than bringing in outside providers for everything, we're going to be spending some concentrated time on our full day in November sharing what we're doing with technology, with different teaching strategies, with project-based learning, etc. And of course doing some culture building, and all of that, developing where we want to go and where we want to be as the school and what's important to us in our practice. So I've started to get some requests for different things, differentiation, maybe one of them, co-teaching, maybe another, bringing them back to review some of the principles of those practices and figure out how to take them further. And we're also looking at bringing in safe and supportive schools practices, trauma-sensitive practices, integrating that with our positive behaviors with sales, and seeing how we can help increase our capacity for different kinds of classroom strategies. So that may be an outside provider piece, or that might be something we develop with an action research and study in-house, and a commitment from a team to do that work. So I think I don't tend to think of professional development as bringing somebody else in. I tend to think of it as a cohort of people coming in and using their own expertise and knowledge, and then reaching out for what we need in addition. We also have the Essex County leadership community that's working on, and I'm part of that, to work on a plan for different kinds of larger activities, social emotional learning and tier 1 approaches and community and culture.
Yeah, and the beauty of that is it's an inter-district, between-district kind of initiative, so
that was really
cross-fertilization of ideas.
Right.
Well, speaking of cross-fertilization ideas, our this episode, if you will, has come to an end.
Oh, that was fast.
I want to thank you so very, very much. It's great to have you on board.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. And for this evening, that is Superintendent's Corner. Thank you.